The relationship between men and mental health has often been called a silent crisis. On this podcast, we're breaking the silence. Welcome to Mental Health. It's time to talk. Here's your host, Allan Kehler.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in on today's show. Yes, the 10th episode. Somehow we have made it to episode 10. We have an author. We have a motivational speaker, a decorated athlete. We have one hell of a great soul. Kevin Rempel. Oh, welcome to the show.
What's going on, Al? Super happy to be here, my friend.
Happy to have you. Now, I know that motocross is obviously something that is near and dear to your heart. Kevin, I grew up small town Saskatchewan. My friend across the road had a 50cc bike, which was the size of a tricycle. I didn't do a lot of risky things like yourself, but before we dive in, can you just please provide a little bit of a backstory for us?
Yeah, sure thing. Starting with the story of like freestyle motocross. When I was a kid, my dream was to ride, jump in the X Games. Started my first company when I was 23, performed a bunch of shows locally in Ontario. For me, that was like living the dream. On Canada Day in 2006, it was my first show. And then 2 weeks later, my second show, I crashed. So I ended up showing there, wasn't mentally focused that day. First jump, had to hit the eject button and fell 75 feet, steel to steel without the motorcycle. I crashed and then ended up breaking my back, pelvis, my ribs, and I was instantly paralyzed.
Can't imagine. And when you were lying there, Kevin, looking up at the sky, what ran through your head?
Do you swear on the show? I was like, fuck, I'm paralyzed. Like in different terms. Like I was just like, fuck. Like it really happened because I always knew it could happen. And I don't regret anything about that or my life because when we throw our leg, my perspective is that by throwing your leg over a motorcycle, you assume that risk. It's like today I'm an entrepreneur as well and pursuing entrepreneurship or maybe even pursuing parenting or, could you choose that or starting a new career or moving to a different city. It's like when we do these things, we know that there's a risk that things might go wrong. And so when I got injured, what I knew is that I was responsible. And it's one of the first key principles I'll speak about in my keynote presentation around the hero mindset, which we can dive into later. But basically, I knew that I needed to accept responsibility. So despite feeling like, oh my God, I can't believe this just happened, what I knew is that I was responsible for this and that I need to focus on what I can control and then what I'm going to do about it.
Yeah. That is most admirable. Here's the thing that I find fascinating, Kevin. So this would have been 4 years prior to that jump, making you 19 years old. And you were hunting with your father when an accident took place. And I mean, why that's significant? Well, actually, I'm not even going to steal any thunder. Do you mind just breaking down what kind of happened that day?
Yeah. So 4 years before my accident, I was out hunting with my dad. We were building a tree stand and one of the branches my dad was standing on broke. So he fell 2 stories to the ground, broke his back and became a complete paraplegic a few years from retirement. Now, the difference between my dad and myself, and as anyone who's a viewer watching this will see, like I'm moving around, like I'm not sitting in a wheelchair. I'm standing, I'm walking and it looks like everything's fine. The difference between my dad and myself is that he was a complete paraplegic, so he severed his spinal cord. I am an incomplete paraplegic, so I fractured and dislocated my vertebrae. So my spinal cord was a zigzag. Was pulled and pinched, surgery realigned it, and with a little bit of luck and a lot of hard work, I was able to learn to walk again. Now, unfortunately, my dad dealt with a lot of depression, living with a disability. He was in his early 50s, and not just the depression was difficult for him, but he then picked up a gambling addiction because he couldn't enjoy his pension money through retirement. And then that ended up starting to drive my family apart. It drove my mom away, and my mom ended up leaving my dad, not because of his disability, but because of his attitude. And 7 weeks later, my dad ended up, after 5 years, my mom left my dad. And then 7 weeks later, my dad took his own life.
That is a lot to endure, Kevin. And I mean, I was a compulsive gambler for years, and gambling really is about that escape. Your father had a really hard time accepting his injury. And that, to me, Kevin, is what has always fascinated me. You have very similar incidents, and yet it was your attitude that allowed you to get to where you are today. I think it was your physiotherapist. There's a great documentary for anyone listening on TSN, and it kind of follows your story. I believe it was shot 10 years ago, right back in 2010. But they're interviewing your physiotherapist, and the thing that she talks about is attitude, because many doctors didn't think you'd ever be able to walk again, but right off the hop, it was that attitude that took you a very different direction, down a very different path than your father.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I can allude now more to the story, like my signature keynote, the hero mindset, because as Mary Ann, my physiotherapist, mentioned in that documentary, is that my attitude is what really set me apart from my dad and others who have had similar injuries. Is that I believe that each of us can adopt a mindset that we can carry throughout our lives about how to become a hero in our own movie. And how we do that is by focusing on small things that make a big difference in our life. Because when I came home, and we haven't really gotten into my whole sporting background, so I don't know, maybe Alice, do you want me to actually touch on that for a moment here to give further context?
You're the boss. You take this where you want to go.
So to give the viewers and listeners further context to the hero mindset, is after I was paralyzed and my dad passed away, I was trying to find something new to direct my energy towards, and just discovering what life looked like after a spinal cord injury. And so I had no idea that Paralympic sport existed. I ended up getting introduced to first wheelchair basketball, and then eventually sledge hockey. And sledge hockey, for those who haven't heard, is where you play hockey sitting down on the ice and you pull yourself around using your arms. And so, again, long story short, I ended up playing 5 years with Team Canada, competed in the 2014 Paralympic Games in Sochi, Russia, and helped Canada earn a bronze medal. And when I came home from the Paralympic Games, I was at events often called a hero. And I used to kind of like just shake my head, because I think to myself, I know, yes, I've achieved a lot and I've done some remarkable things, but in my eyes, I feel like I'm still just like each of you. That all I've done is a few little things really, really well over a long period of time. And so it was at that time that I literally, I didn't have a physical dictionary, so I went on Google, but I went online to look up in the dictionary the definition of a hero. And the definition of a hero is a person either admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. So it's easy for me to be put on a pedestal for those outstanding achievements, but what's more important is the courage and the noble qualities that help you achieve those noble achievements. And so each of us in our life have the ability to adopt a hero mindset where we choose to practice courage, where we choose to develop noble qualities. And by doing so, that is how we can continue to show up every day in our life despite the adversity that we're facing. And that is how we can each become a hero in our own movie.
Well said. Well said. Makes good sense. And the interesting thing for me, Kevin, is from the day that you first got onto a sled and learned how to play sledge hockey, it was 2 years later that all of a sudden you made Team Canada. And that, to me, just speaks to that mindset once again. You were determined and committed to make it happen.
Yeah, it was, you know, Paralympic sport's interesting because without question, to reach that level, you are becoming and are one of the best in the world. So that's something that none of us can be taken away from us is, you know, being a Paralympian, you're one of the best in the world, which is so amazing. And at the same time, in my experience, how would I describe it? It's like, it's interesting because entering the sport, having a bit of a hockey background when I played as a kid, really gave me a bit of an advantage to some other players who have a disability and discover the sport, but maybe don't necessarily have a hockey background. And so my hockey background paired with my athletic experience in motocross, I feel really gave me the mindset again and the drive to really practice and discipline myself to get as good as I could, as fast as I can. And then, yeah, like the sledge hockey world is a small community. People will know if you're on the way up. And so people talk. And then my second year, I played on first year was house league, then provincial. And then my third year made Team Canada.
It's quite remarkable. Now, I was born in Humboldt, Saskatchewan. And I didn't grow up there, but I grew up cheering for the Humboldt Broncos. Then that accident took place, and I know that struck a chord with you, Kevin. And there's a beautiful picture of you placing sledge hockey sticks on your balcony. Why was that incident significant for you?
Well, of course, number one, like, it rocked the entire hockey community globally. So just feeling the pain that so many of us would resonate with, remembering what it's like going to the rink, the drive to the rink, like when the accident happened, you know, as a team member, being on the bus, like it just sent shockwaves throughout the hockey world. And then in addition to that, one of the injured players, Ryan Stresniski, he, after waking up from surgery, discovered he had a spinal cord injury, or learned that he had a spinal cord injury. And long story short there too, he made a comment to his father, Tom, that if he can't stand up and play hockey, he wants to help Canada win a gold medal in sledge hockey. And so as a tribute, as many Canadians and families and people around the world were doing, when they were putting hockey sticks out on the balconies, on their balcony, in memory of those injured players. And so for me, what that meant at that time, especially, like, I just wanted to honor them in my own way, and thinking about the players that were lost. And then Ryan making the comment about sledge hockey. I had a bunch of sticks from a program that I run, and so that was my way of honoring them and acknowledging in my own way, just like the pain that I also experienced, just like thinking about the whole scene and the spinal cord injury life, and just like paying tribute to those that were lost as well.
I remember, Kevin, hearing that on the radio. I remember hearing Ryan expressing an interest in sledge hockey, and the first thing that I thought of was you. And I remember actually calling you, and I said, Kevin, hey, Kevin, what do you think about connecting with Ryan? And you said, already did. And I thought, yeah, of course you did, because that's you, an incredibly giving soul. And that's the thing, not a lot of people have any inkling or know what it's like to wake up in a hospital bed, staring up at the ceiling, not knowing whether or not you're going to walk again and what life is going to be like from that point forward.
Yeah. You know, I mean, tying this together with the work that you do, you know, let's take mental health as an example. You know, the people that we can help many people because we've been there. You know, an example I sometimes share, or just through conversations with people, is at the end of the day, whether it's mental health or a spinal cord injury or maybe bankruptcy or, again, like a relationship separation, there's so many scenarios. It's like, would you rather learn from someone who's like read about it, maybe has like a professional degree, and no disrespect to anybody who does, but I also know that if I had a choice, I'd rather take advice or learn from the person who's got the lived experience, who's made it through to the other side. I think about Alcoholics Anonymous as an example. I've never had a problem, but I have had friends who have, and one of my closest friends invited me to a meeting, and I wanted to go just to like experience it and learn more. And that program is based around people with lived experience, and they have mentors, and those mentors are how they help each other stay on track, because it's so relatable. And so I think that's one of the unique positions that you and I have, and that I really love about both spinal cord injury life and mental health, is that I like helping people, and I like when I get that opportunity, because for those that are struggling, I can genuinely say, like, I've been there. I know what it's like to be at rock bottom. I know what it's like to feel suicidal. I know what it's like to be paralyzed in a bed and not wonder what your life's going to look like. So yeah, I mean, I don't mind it at all. It was tough to go through, but yeah, I like it.
I can't imagine. I mean, I know Daniel's listening right now, and he commented he's also in recovery like myself. And he says this: acceptance, courage, and wisdom. Those are the three things that you touched on before, Kevin. He says, sounds like a prayer I know. Yes, the Serenity Prayer touches on so many key things. And for you, in order to get to where you are today, obviously acceptance had to have been key. And there's a question coming in that says, what thoughts gave you the drive to find that new mindset?
Yeah, well, you're hitting the nail on the head already here. The hero mindset, now I can kind of bring it full circle. 3 key principles. Number 1 is accept responsibility. Number 2 is take things one step at a time. And number 3 is to never, ever give up. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's the truth. And just circling back to the first key principle and that moment when I fell, like whether it was when I was on the ground, paralyzed, looked up at the sky and realized my life was never going to be the same, or when I was suicidal and I never have injured myself, never attempted anything, but I've had a knife in my hand and those were the thoughts were going crazy. And, for those who want to know both what it was like for me and what I encourage us to say to ourselves, or to recognize that when we're in these moments, what we say to ourselves is the difference between which path we are going to choose, is that number 1 is like when I was laying on the ground paralyzed, I had a friend, Chris, who had captured the entire crash on film, because we just filmed ourselves riding our bikes. That's just what we did to make movies. And Chris runs over to me and he runs down, he puts his hand out, he says, "Remps, I love you, man." And I literally looked up at Chris's eyes and I grabbed his hand. I said, "Chris, you better be filming this."
Yeah.
Which is going to sound super crazy. Like, what was going through your head? Because what I knew is that when I thought about the heroes in my life, the athletes, the other riders who get knocked down, they would pick themselves back up and they'd go back out and they win a medal again. They get back on the bike, because that's just what we do. And so the first lesson here is just to adopt that mindset, to adopt a resilient mindset that when we fall down, we pick ourselves back up, because that's just what we do. And then the second piece I'd like to share is talking about like a moment of feeling suicidal as an example. Like when the year after my dad passed away, felt the same. I'm in my kitchen, I got a knife in my hand and crazy thoughts were going through my head. And for me, that was pretty much, okay, I'm here. I'm at rock bottom. Well, this is not Kevin. I don't do this. Why do I have this? And so it was like in a moment I was thinking to myself, that nobody would blame me if I took the same path as my dad. But then I asked myself the question, what do I want my story to be? For those of you listening or watching, when you find yourself in these difficult moments, is to ask yourself the question, what do you want your story to be? Every single day, we have a chance to write a new script. Every single day, we have an opportunity to start a new chapter, to pick ourselves back up and become that hero in our own movie. But it starts in those moments where you feel like giving up. And so when you find yourself in those moments, recognize that what we say to ourselves, the mindset that we choose to adopt, will be the difference between you taking the path perhaps like my dad took, or the path that I knew I had an opportunity to take myself. And when we choose to take the path that we know may be more difficult, but it's the one that we need to take, that is how we can become a hero in our own movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you want to be remembered? Those were the words that somebody said to me when I attended my very first Gamblers Anonymous meeting. And for whatever reason, that stuck. And obviously then ownership, which you already alluded to, has got to take place. You know, that victim mentality existed in me for a long time. Was that present for you, Kevin, where it was the woe is me? I mean, when you were told that there was a chance that you would never walk again, did that victim mentality creep in, or was it always since the get-go, I got this?
For me, it was, I got this because of what I learned from my dad. And again, first principle, hero mindset, accept responsibility, is that when I was sitting with before my injury, I'd be sitting with my dad at the kitchen table, and he kept saying the same three things: that the branch shouldn't have broke, it's not my fault, and life's not fair. And so how many of us right now might you feel like, especially with COVID, what we're experiencing in our life today, that it shouldn't have happened, it's not your fault, and that it's not fair? What I saw and what I learned from my dad is that when you choose a victim mentality, you start to drive yourself into a negative downward spiral. You start pushing, you become more negative, pessimistic, you start blaming others, you start blaming external circumstances and other things, other people for that you don't have any control over. And so my lesson from my dad is that you may not be responsible for what's happened in your life, but you're always responsible for what you do about it. And you can't blame a tree. Where in your life might you be blaming a tree today? Blaming COVID, blaming your colleague, blaming your spouse, blaming the market, blaming so many different situations. We can't control everything in our life. We can't control external circumstances, but we can control our mental mindset, our decisions, the habits, the attitude, as we've alluded to here, the choices that we choose to make. That is where we start to take our power back. And so when we choose to accept responsibility in our life, again, I'm going to drive this point forward today on our session here. When we choose to accept responsibility, that is the first step to becoming a hero in your own movie.
Okay. I don't remember what you just said. Can you say that one more time?
When we choose to accept responsibility for our life, that is how we can become a hero in our own movie.
Got it, Kevin. Now, I know I was meeting with an elder who said to me, every time that you point your finger at someone or something, you better pay attention to the three back itself. And for me, with battling addictions, recovery, obviously had to start there. Now, what fascinates me is that mindset, and you said it existed right from the hop. 1 year to the day from that accident, what do you do? Where are you?
Well, exactly a year to the day, I was walking again, but even got back on the bike and went riding again.
It's incredible. I mean, before this interview, I watched that video of you ripping through the sand, and it is one of those moments that just makes you stop. And I mean, for me, Kevin, it was just absolute admiration, because very few people have that mindset. Now, for you, yeah, it seems like it was just always there. For some people, like, tell me what your philosophy is around predisposition to resiliency, because the third book that I wrote was called Born Resilient, and I wanted to figure out what makes one resilient. You clearly have always had it, and then your father being a backwards teacher, you didn't want to go down that path. But what's your philosophy around people born resilient?
Yeah, the whole thing about my dad, backwards teacher, I've never heard that, but it's good. A good example. Sorry, I just realized my camera's kind of gone blurry here. I don't know what's going on.
No worries.
There's a YouTube personality that I discovered years ago, back in like 2006, 2007. His name's Elliot Hulse, and he had a video one time just talked about two types of stress. There's distress and there's eustress. Have you ever heard this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, for those who haven't heard, basically distress is when something happens in your life and it's obviously outside of your control. COVID's another great example. It has thrown our world into distress, and we have to just figure out suddenly what we're going to do next. And that could be in the form of cancer. Again, could be losing your job. Maybe a partner leaves, situations like that. And you didn't see it coming. On the other side is eustress, where we choose to do difficult things, where we choose to put ourselves in uncomfortable places and situations. And both of these scenarios are stressful, but at least one we've chosen to grow through it versus being forced to grow through it. And so going back to lessons I learned from my dad is that my dad waited to live his life. He waited until retirement to go do the things that he wanted to do. He wasn't interested in taking chances. And when I saw my dad get injured, that in any moment we can experience distress and something blindsides us that we didn't see coming. And now again, the world experienced this. Is that how long will you wait? How long will you wait to do those things that you want to do, to take a chance on a business, to ask a person out, to apply for that promotion, to, just like you've done, start a podcast? Like, we can wait until we get forced into situations to become resilient, or we can choose to practice this before distress happens. And so I saw my dad experience distress. And from that, it taught me that I would rather choose eustress. And so from just practice, time over time, one of the things that is true about resilience is that every time that we conquer a goal, we become stronger to take on the next. And so it's just been a perpetual experience now over the last 18, 19 years that I know, like, my experience is that we grow through resilience. We become more resilient as we grow. And then my dad's experience is what kind of started it all for me.
Yeah, and most of our growth comes from our so-called failures, not our successes. It's very easy to say, it's hard to do, because, Kevin, change is scary. We have to be vulnerable. We have to take risks. But yeah, that's how we grow. I think what you're basically saying to me is there are people who choose to go through life merely existing, and there are those who go through life living.
Exactly. And I know that I want to fucking live.
Oh
Like,
my!
I want to experience, like, another like decision I made again before I got injured is that like I want to experience life. If I get paralyzed, fine, but I want to know that I took a swing. I got up to the plate and I took a swing at bat. It's like that's for me. There was inner peace when I was paralyzed. I felt very peaceful inside, despite how painful and difficult it was, because I knew that I took a chance at doing what I wanted to do because I don't know how long I'm going to be here for. And the same thing goes too, like I said, back to business. It's like I became an entrepreneur and I've hit some highs and lost a lot of money along the way too. But like, I'm glad I took a swing. And whether it's like, asking a girl out, I'm like, yeah, I've been rejected before, but like, at least I took a swing. And so for me, extreme sports is all about adrenaline rush, kind of getting a hit. I never got into drugs or thankfully I never had any terrible experiences with that where I felt addicted, but I was definitely addicted to adrenaline. And we got our hit, we got our fix by doing risky things. And the risks that I used to take on my motorcycle, I now take in business. And that comes in the form of, like I said, a marketing campaign, creating a new keynote to deliver a speech, starting the sledge hockey experience team building business when it's never been done before, or investing into real estate. Like for me, those are my hits now. Is like, how can I take my lived experience, turn it into something that I can use to help better my life and the lives of others, and then grow through that. And then that becomes a new, healthier path in order to find similar excitement in life.
Well, first of all, I find it very hard to believe that you were ever rejected by a woman.
Oh, trust me.
Second of all, you talk about this sledge hockey coaching experience. Now, I found that very fascinating because, to your point, it has never been done before. And I think it's a very unique idea. And that's just it. You always think outside the box. It requires creativity. You've brought up COVID. How do you deal with it? Think outside the box. The sledge hockey experience, can you briefly share what you created? Because maybe there's people who would be intrigued and interested in taking that. I would love to someday.
Sure. Like today it's closed because we're not doing any group gatherings. But the short story is I run a team building program to bring you on the ice to play a Paralympic sport. And in the process, you learn about the sport or Paralympic sport, and you learn about people with disabilities. And it's a team building activity that's not only fun, but will help give you a new perspective. What we like to say is get butt down for a new perspective on life and people with disabilities. And so,
is that on a t-shirt?
We got stickers.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So as soon as we can get together in gatherings again, it doesn't look like it's going to be a 2021 deal, but it's been for those who haven't seen it, you can visit playsledgehockey.com online to learn more about what the program looks like. But basically, there's a lot of nonprofits out there that have got 20 or 30 hockey sleds. But I just took a business loan and I've invested into 24 sets of sled sticks and hockey gear and rink dividers and a trailer, and basically created an entire experience as a corporate team building program.
And that's just it. There's people who dream and there's people who do. You've always been a doer. The finances weren't there. What does Kevin Rempel do? He takes out a loan, makes it happen. And I mean, I know also you mentioned, with what you're up to now, you have the keynotes, which I know are taking off. Anybody looking for a speaker on resilience, mental health, highly recommended. I think, Kevin, we actually met somewhere in Ontario. I think we were watching Clint, right? Clint Malarchuk. Wasn't that we were in Ontario somewhere.
We were at a workplace safety event.
Oh, right. That's where
Clint would have been connected in some way for sure.
I think he was speaking, and then you gave me your book, and the book, Still Standing, is a great read. It's somewhere in here. I read it cover to cover.
Right here.
There it is. Look at that. literally still standing. Good cover choice. Great read. Kevin, should people be interested in any of the things that you've created, how could they find you?
Yeah, KevinRempel.com is the best place to go. Kevin, Rempel. If you go to kevinrempel.com/book, you can download a free e-copy or purchase a hard copy on Amazon. And that's the best place. If you just Google Kevin Rempel, Instagram, and everything else will pop up as well.
Just to be clear, you said the word free ebook, yes?
Yes, sir.
Oh, people love the word free. Highly recommended. Great read, great insights. Kevin, I love how you have just taken life by the horns. I love seeing where you are going to take life. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. You take good care.
Thanks, brother. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure, and I appreciate all the work that you do as well to help so many people.
Thanks, Kevin. Love you, man. Good to see you.
Love you too, bro. I'll see you.
See ya. Thanks, everyone, so much for taking the time to tune in. Keep talking and be well.